The rider, a huge man in a black leather vest, hit the ground with a thud, clutching his chest, gasping for air. His face drained of color. At the far pump, Naomi Carter, a single mother just off a morning shift, froze. In her pocket, $8 crumpled, her daughter's lunch money. The clerk shouted from the doorway, "Leave him, those bikers only bring trouble." She tore off her work jacket, slipped it under his head to keep him from the burning pavement, and shouted, "Sir, can you hear me?" Heart racing, Naomi sprinted inside. "Bottle of aspirin, water. Hurry!" she yelled, slamming her last $8 on the counter. Back outside, she knelt beside him, poured water to his lips, pressed 2 pills onto his tongue. "Chew. Come on, stay with me." His hand twitched, weak but alive. Sirens wailed in the distance, but by then he was breathing again. Naomi didn't know she'd just saved one of the most feared men in America, or that by tomorrow 100 motorcycles would surround her home. Subscribe to Heart Tales, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Let's check in: 1 for first-time viewer, 2 if you've seen a few, 3 if you never miss. The motorcycle skidded sideways, sparks flying, and the rider, a broad man in a black leather vest, was thrown into the air. His body hit the concrete hard, rolled twice, and lay still beside the gas pumps. Naomi Carter saw it happen from 30 feet away. She dropped the plastic bag in her hand, 2 apples and a carton of milk, tonight's dinner, and ran. Heat rippled off the pavement, the smell of burning rubber filling her nose. The biker's hand twitched once, then went limp. "Sir," she shouted, kneeling beside him. His face was grey, his chest barely moving. Tattoos coiled up his arm, flames, a dagger, a pair of wings, wrapping the words "Hell's Angels." The gas station clerk leaned out the door, phone in hand, but not dialing. "Lady, don't. Those guys are bad news. Walk away." Naomi ignored him. She pressed her ear to the man's chest. Faint heartbeat. She grabbed his wrist, pulse weak. "Come on," she whispered, shaking him gently. His eyelids fluttered. A strangled sound came from his throat, half gasp, half plea. "Chest," he rasped. "Hurts." "You're having a heart attack," she said. "Stay with me." She looked up. The clerk still hadn't called. Her voice turned sharp. "Call 911 now." He froze. "I'm not getting involved," Naomi cursed under her breath. There was no time. Her brain raced through everything she remembered from her grandmother's first aid lessons. Aspirin, heart, blood flow. She needed aspirin fast. She tore across the lot, the sun stabbing her eyes. Inside, the clerk looked at her like she was insane. "A bottle of aspirin and water," she snapped. "That's $7. Naomi's hand went to her pocket. $8 crumpled, her daughter's lunch money for tomorrow. She slapped them on the counter. "Keep it." He hesitated. She grabbed the items herself, sprinted back outside. The biker was barely breathing. Naomi dropped to her knees again, ripped the cap off the bottle, and shook 2 pills into her hand. "Chew these," she said, sliding her arm under his head. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding. She forced the aspirin between them. "Good. Chew. That's it. Don't stop." She tipped the water bottle to his lips, trickling a few drops down his throat. The man coughed violently, chest heaving, and then took one long, desperate breath. "That's it," she whispered. "You're okay. Just breathe." A shadow fell across them. A truck driver had stopped watching nervously. "You should leave him, lady," he muttered. "People like him don't change." Naomi shot him a glare. "People like him are still people." The driver hesitated, then backed away, muttering. The biker's hand gripped her wrist weakly. "Name," he whispered. "Naomi." He swallowed, eyes unfocused. "Tell them Holt owes you." "Tell who?" she asked, but his eyes rolled back, breath catching again. Sirens wailed in the distance. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. The pulse was faint, but there. "Hold on," she said. "Help's coming." The first paramedic truck tore into the lot lights, flashing red and blue against the silver Harley. Medics jumped out, kneeling beside them. "What's his condition?" one asked. "Collapsed chest pain," she said quickly. "2 aspirin about 3 minutes ago." The medic glanced at her, impressed. "Good call. You might have just saved him." As they worked, Naomi stumbled to her feet, heart still racing. Her knees burned from the asphalt. The medics loaded the biker onto the stretcher. Before they pushed him inside, his hand reached out again. She took it automatically. His eyes opened a crack, locking on hers. "You'll see them," he whispered. Then the doors slammed. The siren rose again, fading into the distance. Naomi stood there shaking, staring at the dark streak on the concrete where his body had been. Sweat dripped down her temple. She'd done what she could. Maybe it was enough. The clerk stepped out, smirking. "You just threw away your last $8, lady. That guy's a criminal. He wouldn't have done the same for you." Naomi turned toward him. "Maybe not," she said quietly. But he was dying. She picked up her bag from where it had fallen. The milk had burst open, leaking across the asphalt. She sighed, turned toward the road, and started walking home. Her apartment was 2 miles away, and every step felt heavier than the last. The city hummed around her, cars passing, radios, blaring, strangers brushing by, but it all sounded distant. She couldn't stop replaying the sound of his voice. "Tell them Holt owes you." By the time she reached her building, the sun was low shadows stretching across cracked pavement. The stairwell smelled of dust and old paint. She unlocked the door to her tiny 1-bedroom apartment and exhaled. The air inside was thick and warm. Leah's crayons were scattered across the floor, her drawings taped proudly on the fridge. Stick figure houses, rainbows, one that said, "Mommy plus me." Naomi dropped the grocery bag on the counter. Half the milk was gone, but she poured what was left into a glass anyway. Dinner would be toast and water. She didn't mind skipping meals, but she couldn't stand seeing Leah hungry. The little girl padded into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed. "Mommy, you're home," Naomi smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Hey, baby. Did you have fun with Mrs. Lane? She let me watch cartoons," Leah said proudly, then frowned. "You look tired." "I'm fine," Naomi lied. She knelt, hugging her daughter tightly. "Go wash up, okay? I'll make you something to eat." Leah nodded and ran off. Naomi stared after her, the smile fading. The $8 were gone, but she couldn't regret it. Not when she saw that man's chest rising again after he'd gone still. When Leah was asleep, Naomi sat alone at the kitchen table. The clock ticked quietly. She pulled out a small frayed notebook from the drawer, the one her grandmother had given her years ago. On the cover, written in faded ink, 3 blessings a day. She flipped to a blank page and wrote slowly, her hand still trembling. 1. Leah is safe. 2. I helped someone today. 3. Tomorrow will be better. She looked at the list until her eyes blurred. Tomorrow will be better, she whispered again like a prayer. Across town, inside a quiet hospital room, Axel Holt's heart monitor beeped steadily. He was alive, but barely. The nurse adjusted his IV and smiled faintly. "You're lucky, Mr. Holt. The woman who found you saved your life." He opened his eyes slowly. Name she didn't say. He turned his head toward the window. Beyond it, the city lights flickered. "Find her," he murmured. Outside the room, a tall, younger man leaned against the wall, phone in hand. His name was Ryder, Axel's right-hand man. When the doctor stepped out, Ryder straightened. "He's awake." Axel's voice, rough and low, came from inside the room. "Ryder." Ryder pushed the door open. "Yeah, boss, call the crew," Axel said, still staring at the window. "All of them?" Ryder frowned. "You sure? After what happened last month, do it." Axel's voice sharpened. "That woman spent her last $8 to keep me breathing. Nobody walks away from that kind of loyalty. Tomorrow morning we ride. Ryder hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. As he walked down the hallway, he sent a message to the network. Within minutes, phones buzzed across the state. Riders revved engines in garages. Tools clanked. Gasoline splashed into tanks. Word spread like wildfire. The boss is calling everyone. For her. Back in her apartment, Naomi didn't know any of it. She checked Leah's homework, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. The girl murmured in her sleep, hugging her stuffed rabbit. Naomi lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. The roar of the Harley, the crash, the heat, the man's voice saying her name. What did "tell them Holt owes you" even mean? Probably nothing. Just delirium. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped into something larger than herself. Outside, the city was quiet except for one faint sound in the distance. A motorcycle engine, then another, and another. Naomi turned her head toward the window, heart thudding. The noise faded into the night, leaving behind only silence and the hum of the ceiling fan. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow will be better. She didn't know that across the city, garages were lighting up, headlights cutting through darkness, and 100 riders were already getting ready to move. By morning, the world would know her name. Morning sunlight poured through the blinds, soft and golden, but Naomi Carter didn't feel it. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crash, the screeching metal, the biker's pale face, the way his hand had clung weakly to hers. The alarm buzzed at 6. She shut it off before it rang twice. Leah was already awake, rubbing her eyes and clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Morning, Mommy," she said. "Morning, baby." Naomi smiled faintly and brushed the little girl's hair back. "Breakfast time." She opened the cupboard. A single banana, half a sleeve of crackers. She split the banana in two, laid it out with the crackers on a plate, and poured a glass of water. "Special breakfast today," she said, forcing cheer into her voice. Leah grinned. "My favorite." Naomi laughed softly, though her chest tightened. $8 gone. No backup, no extra. But she didn't regret it. Somewhere out there, that man, Axel Holt, was still alive because she hadn't walked away. After Leah left for school, Naomi headed to work at the laundromat. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside. The scent of detergent and heat hit her. Machines rumbled, steam rising. She clocked in, tied her apron, and started folding. For a few hours the rhythm kept her grounded, fold, stack, repeat. But every now and then her mind drifted. "Tell them Holt owes you." The words looped like a song she couldn't shake. What did he mean? Who was them? By noon she took a short break near the back door, sipping from a paper cup of water. Her co-worker Grace, a kind woman in her 50s with quick eyes and a permanent tired smile, slid onto the stool beside her. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Grace said. Naomi hesitated, then told her everything. The crash, the heart attack, the aspirin, how she'd spent her last money to save a stranger. Grace stared at her for a long moment. "You helped a Hell's Angel." Naomi nodded. "He was dying, Grace. Nobody else would help." Grace leaned back, shaking her head slowly. "That's brave, honey. Brave and foolish." "I didn't think," Naomi said. "I just acted." Grace gave her a gentle smile. "That's what makes it brave." She reached over and squeezed Naomi's hand. "Don't you let anyone make you feel bad about doing the right thing." Naomi smiled weakly. "Mrs. Peterson already tried this morning. She said I was crazy for even touching him." Grace rolled her eyes. That woman would call a rainbow dangerous if it came from the wrong direction. They both laughed softly. It was the first time Naomi had laughed since yesterday. The rest of the shift passed quietly. By 3 p.m. she untied her apron and stepped into the sunlight. The air smelled like exhaust and summer dust. She started the long walk home, her shoes scuffing against the sidewalk. Halfway there, she felt it, a low vibration, deep and heavy. A motorcycle engine. She turned around. A single bike was idling at the curb chrome, catching the light. A man sat astride it, helmet on, leather vest, marked with the same red and white insignia she'd seen yesterday. Her heart jumped. The rider shut off the engine and removed his helmet. He was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair, sharp eyes, and a scar along his jawline. "Naomi Carter," he called. She froze. "Who's asking?" He stepped closer, holding up both hands. "Name's Ryder. I'm with the Angels. You helped my boss Axel Holt yesterday." Her pulse spiked. "Is he okay?" "He's alive because of you," Ryder said. "He wanted me to find you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small white card. It was thick, embossed with a golden crown with wings. Beneath it, a single phone number. No name, no address. Naomi frowned. "What is this?" he said. "You should call that number tomorrow." "That's all I know." She hesitated, taking the card carefully. The texture was oddly warm, heavy, like metal. "Is this some kind of biker thing?" Ryder's expression softened. "You don't have to be scared. You did something good, and the man you saved doesn't forget things like that." Naomi crossed her arms. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," Ryder said quietly. "That's why it matters." He turned, sliding his helmet back on. "One more thing. If anyone ever gives you trouble, shows up asking questions, say Holt's name. It'll be enough." Before she could ask what he meant, he revved the engine and rode off, leaving the air heavy with exhaust and the faint smell of gasoline. Naomi stood there a long moment, the card between her fingers, the afternoon sunlight glinting off its embossed crown. A phone number and a symbol, that was it. That night, after Leah was asleep, Naomi sat at the small kitchen table again. She laid the card flat beside her journal. The wings on the crown shimmered in the lamplight. She stared at it for a while, then shook her head and whispered, "I'm not calling." Still, she didn't throw it away. She tucked it under the corner of her notebook next to the grocery list. Across the city, in a warehouse lined with motorcycles, Axel Holt sat propped against a crate, his arm still hooked to an IV bag. The air smelled of fuel and leather. Around him, 24 bikers waited in silence. "She saved me," he said, voice gravel low. "A stranger. Spent her last $8 on aspirin and water, no questions, no fear." Ryder nodded. "She doesn't want anything from you, boss." Holt's eyes were sharp, even through the fatigue. "That's the point. You don't repay a woman like that with money. You repay her with loyalty." The room was quiet. Then Holt looked up. "Tomorrow morning we ride to her street. I want every man who's ever worn this patch there. If anyone asks why, tell them we're delivering a debt." Back in her apartment, Naomi dreamed of engines thunder rolling closer, shaking the walls. When she woke, her heart was racing. The morning light painted the room pale gold. The card still sat on the table, catching the sunday. She poured herself coffee, ignoring the tremor in her hands. Then, almost without thinking, she picked up her phone and typed the number into a message. "Hi, this is Naomi Carter. Ryder gave me this card." She hesitated for 3 long seconds before hitting send. Her phone buzzed almost instantly. "This is Cole. Mr. Holt wants to meet you today, 3 p.m. Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. Naomi stared at the screen. Her stomach tightened. She typed back, "Why?" The reply came seconds later. "Because he doesn't forget kindness." By afternoon, the sun had turned white hot. Naomi stood on the sidewalk outside Murphy's Diner, the card heavy in her pocket. Motorcycles lined the curb, dozens of them, polished chrome glinting. The noise of traffic dulled under the low growl of engines idling. She almost turned around, almost walked away. But something in her refused to. She pushed the door open. The bell chimed. The diner was packed, every booth filled with bikers. The air smelled of coffee and engine grease. Conversations stopped the moment she stepped inside. Heads turned. Ryder appeared from the back, smiling faintly. "Naomi, glad you came." He led her past the rows of silent men. As she walked, something strange happened. Each one stood. One by one, they rose to their feet, nodding slightly as she passed. The sound of boots against the floor echoed like distant thunder. In the last booth by the window sat Axel Holt. He looked older up close, rougher but alive. A bandage wrapped around his arm. When he saw her, he pushed himself up slowly and extended a hand. "Miss Carter," he said, "please sit." Naomi sat cautiously. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled faintly. "The doctor said you gave me aspirin before they arrived." She nodded. "2 tablets. It's all I could think of." "Smart," he said. "You bought me time. I did what anyone would have done." "No," he said quietly. "You did what most wouldn't." He reached into his vest and pulled out another card, the same crown and wings, setting it on the table between them. "That's the emblem of my daughter's charity. Lily's legacy, named after her." Naomi looked down. Charity Holt's jaw tightened. "She died when she was 7, leukemia. We couldn't afford treatment fast enough. After that I swore if anyone showed kindness when they had nothing, I'd pay it forward. You gave me something I can never repay, so tomorrow we're going to fix that." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Holt smiled. "You'll see." He stood wincing slightly and reached for his cane. "Thank you again, Miss Carter." Then he turned and left the door swinging closed behind him. Naomi sat there frozen, staring at the empty seat. The card, the words, "Lily's legacy," shining faintly under the diner lights. Outside, engines growled to life one by one. The sound shook the windows as they rode off into the evening. Naomi didn't know it yet, but the next sunrise would bring the loudest morning her street had ever heard. Naomi Carter walked out of Murphy's diner with the sound of engines still echoing in her chest. The sun was sliding low, turning the sky a burnished gold. But all she could hear was the rhythmic hum of 100 motorcycles pulling away in formation. She stood on the curb for a moment, the wind stirred by their departure, tugging at her uniform. The card Axel Holt had given her was warm in her hand, edges pressed deep into her skin. She didn't understand what had just happened. Dozens of bikers had stood for her like soldiers in a silent ceremony, and then the man she'd saved, someone who could have been terrifying in any other circumstance, had thanked her with the softness of a father. None of it made sense. Naomi tucked the card into her pocket, glanced both ways, and started walking toward the bus stop. Her heart wouldn't slow down. Every passing car sounded like a Harley. Every glance from a stranger made her flinch. When she finally got home, Mrs. Peterson was waiting. The older woman stood on the front steps, arms folded tight, eyes hard as nails. Her voice snapped like a broom handle. "So it's true. You went to meet them." Naomi froze. "What are you talking about? Don't you play dumb with me?" Mrs. Peterson said. "I saw those men, those bikers, pull up outside the diner. Half the neighborhood's been talking about it all afternoon." Naomi took a slow breath. "They just wanted to say thank you. That's all. Thank you, Mrs." Peterson's eyebrows shot up. "You think people like that just say thank you? You don't know what kind of trouble you're inviting here. You've got a little girl to think about, Naomi. This isn't brave, it's reckless." Naomi kept her tone calm, but her stomach was tight. They didn't hurt anyone. They just talked. "That's how it starts," Mrs. Peterson hissed. "Next thing you know, they're using your place to hide their drugs or park their bikes. I've seen it before. You'd better pray they forget you exist." Naomi's jaw clenched. "Maybe the world would be better if we didn't assume everyone was a criminal the second we saw leather." Mrs. Peterson blinked. Startled, Naomi turned and walked past her up the stairs, heart pounding. Behind her, the older woman muttered something about the company you keep. Inside, Leah was drawing at the table, crayons scattered across her notebook. She looked up with a smile that instantly softened Naomi's anger. "Mommy, I made us a picture. See, it's you and me at the park." Naomi knelt beside her. "That's beautiful, baby." She forced a smile. "How was school? Good." Mrs. Lane said, "I'm getting better at reading." Naomi kissed the top of her daughter's head. "I'm proud of you." For the rest of the evening, she tried to focus on normal things, washing dishes, folding clothes, reading Leah a bedtime story, but her mind kept drifting back to Holt's voice. "Tomorrow we're going to fix that." "Fix what?" At midnight, Naomi sat by the window watching the empty street below. The world was quiet, except for the occasional hiss of passing tires. The Crown and Wings card lay on the table, glinting faintly under the lamplight. She reached for it, ran her thumb over the embossed gold. What did they mean by "you'll see"? What could a man like Holt possibly give her that wouldn't come with a price? She turned off the lamp and went to bed, but the silence didn't last. Sometime after 2 in the morning, she woke with a start. A low, distant rumble rolled through the night, soft at first, then fading. It wasn't close, but it was unmistakable. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. She sat up, heart pounding, listening. The sound dwindled until there was only the hum of the refrigerator and Leah's soft breathing from the next room. She told herself it was nothing, just traffic on the highway, but sleep didn't come easy after that. By morning, the world looked ordinary again. Birds on the telephone wires, kids playing before school, neighbors pretending not to stare. Naomi took Leah by the hand and walked her to the corner where the school bus stopped. "Love you, Mommy," Leah said, hopping onto the step. "Love you too, baby. Be good." When the bus pulled away, Naomi lingered on the sidewalk a moment longer than usual. She could feel eyes on her. Sure enough, Mrs. Peterson's curtain shifted across the street. Another neighbor, Mr. Lewis, paused while watering his plants, giving her a long, judgmental look. Naomi turned away and started walking to the laundromat. Half a block down, she saw it, a motorcycle parked at the curb. A single rider sat astride it, helmet on, arms folded. He wasn't moving, just watching her. Naomi stopped. The man didn't. She walked faster. When she glanced back, the bike was gone. At work, Grace noticed immediately. "You okay? You look like you saw a ghost again." Naomi forced a smile. "Just tired." Grace squinted. "This about the biker thing again?" Naomi hesitated, then sighed. "You ever do something you know was right, but everyone around you treats you like you did something wrong?" "All the time," Grace said. "That's how you know it mattered." Naomi smiled faintly. "You sound like my grandmother." Grace shrugged. "She sounds like a smart woman." By lunchtime, Naomi was too restless to eat. She stepped outside to clear her head. The alley behind the laundromat was empty except for a delivery truck idling at the far end. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing slow. Then she heard it again. That same low rumble, faint but distinct, vibrating through the pavement. Her eyes snapped open. At the corner, a pair of motorcycles turned the block, their riders in black vests. They didn't stop, just rolled past, engines growling. One of them raised a hand in a small, almost polite wave. Naomi froze. The gesture wasn't threatening. If anything, it felt protective, like a signal. Still, her pulse wouldn't calm. She hurried back inside, heart hammering. Grace noticed. "Naomi, you're pale. You sure you're okay?" "Yeah," Naomi said softly. "Just thought I saw someone I knew." When her shift ended, she lingered near the front door, peering through the glass. Nothing. Just normal traffic people going about their day. She told herself to stop overthinking. The bikers were probably gone. Holt had said tomorrow, but maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe tomorrow was just a figure of speech. Still, she couldn't shake the unease as she walked home. The late afternoon air felt heavier than usual, charged with something she couldn't name. She kept glancing over her shoulder. Once she caught the glint of sunlight on chrome far behind her, but when she turned again, it was gone. When she reached her street, she found a small envelope wedged into her doorframe. No name, no return address, just her apartment number written in thick black marker. Her stomach tightened. She opened it carefully. Inside was a folded note. "Tomorrow morning, stay home. Trust me." "Ah?" Naomi stared at it, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Ah" for Ryder. She looked around. The street was quiet. Kids playing ball down the block. A dog barking behind a fence. Everything looked normal, but it didn't feel normal. She locked the door behind her, double bolting it this time. Leah was coloring on the floor, humming softly. Naomi crouched beside her, brushing the little girl's hair. "What's wrong?" Mommy Leah asked, sensing the tension. "Nothing, baby. Everything's okay." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night, Naomi couldn't eat. She sat by the window again, the folded note beside her. The city outside glowed with soft amber light, the street lamps flickering on, one by one. She waited, listening. At first there was nothing. Then, somewhere far off, the faint growl of engines. 1, 2, 3. Then more. She leaned closer to the window, searching the horizon. The sound grew louder, rolling through the city like thunder, approaching over distant hills. Leah stirred in her bed. "Mommy, go back to sleep, sweetheart." But Naomi couldn't. She stayed there, watching the darkness beyond the glass, the reflection of her own face staring back. The rumble kept building, slow, relentless. And though fear tightened her chest, she knew deep down whatever was coming wasn't meant to hurt her. It was coming for her. By sunrise, the quiet street would never be the same again. The first thing Naomi Carter felt was vibration. It trembled through the floorboards, through her bed frame, through her chest. Then came the sound, a deep rolling thunder that didn't fade like normal traffic. It grew steady and heavy until every window in the apartment rattled. She sat up fast. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, streaking across the room, but it was drowned by the echo of engines. Leah stirred in the next bed. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Naomi swung her legs off the mattress, heart hammering. "Stay here, sweetheart." She crossed the room, pulled the curtain aside, and froze. The street below was lined end to end with motorcycles. Chrome glinted in the sunlight like a wave of armor. Leather vests shimmered with red and white patches. Engines rumbled in sync, dozens of them, a living heartbeat that shook the quiet neighborhood awake. Mrs. Peterson was already outside, her hair wrapped in curlers, pointing frantically at the street. "Call the police!" she yelled to someone. "They're here for her!" Windows opened. People leaned out, clutching phones, whispering, "It's that woman, the one who helped the biker." Naomi's pulse spiked. For a second she thought maybe she should call the police, but then she remembered the note. "Tomorrow morning, stay home. Trust me." She grabbed her robe, stepped onto the balcony, shielding her eyes from the glare. The air was thick with gasoline and dust. Then, one by one, the engines died. Silence fell heavier than the noise before it. Every head turned toward her. At the front of the formation, a long black Harley idled alone. Behind the handlebars sat a man she recognized even from 3 stories up, Axel Holt. The man she'd pulled back from the edge of death. He climbed off the bike slowly, his cane striking the pavement. A younger rider, Cole, she thought, stepped up beside him, holding a folder in one hand and a duffel bag in the other. Naomi leaned on the railing. "What are you doing here?" she called down, voice trembling. Holt looked up, his face unreadable behind dark glasses. "Repaying a debt." The crowd rippled with unease. Mrs. Peterson crossed her arms. What kind of debt? Holt's head turned toward her, calm but sharp. The kind you don't forget. Two of the bikers pulled tarps off the back of a truck parked behind them. Underneath were boxes stacked high, marked with labels: food, clothing, toys. Gasps echoed through the neighborhood. Holt pointed to Naomi's building. "She spent her last $8 saving my life," he said, voice carrying easily. "So today we make sure she and this street never go hungry again." The tension broke like a snapped wire. A few people clapped nervously. Others just stared, stunned. Mrs. Peterson sputtered. "You can't just bring all this here. This is a quiet neighborhood." Cole stepped forward, handing her a clipboard. "We've already cleared it with city permits. This truck's here for the community, ma'am." His polite smile only made her angrier. Naomi came running down the steps, heart racing. She stopped a few feet from Holt, her robe fluttering in the wind. "You didn't have to do this." Holt nodded once. "I didn't, but I wanted to." He motioned to the boxes. "Half of this is for you and your daughter. The rest for your neighbors, if they'll take it." Naomi looked around. People were starting to edge closer now. Mr. Lewis, the same man who'd given her that disgusted look the day before, now staring at the food like he didn't know whether to thank or fear them. Holt took a slow breath, leaning on his cane. "You gave me time when I was out of it. Money couldn't buy what you did. You saw a dying man and didn't ask who he was. That's something the world forgets too easily." Naomi swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know," he said. "That's why it matters." He turned slightly toward the crowd. "I don't expect anyone here to like what I am. You've heard stories, most of them true. But that doesn't mean men like me can't pay a debt with honor." The silence stretched. Then Cole opened the duffel bag and pulled out a single envelope, handing it to Naomi. "This is from Mr. Holt. You should read it." Inside was a check, $25,000, and a single note written in heavy, deliberate handwriting. "You gave your last 8. Here's ours." Her breath caught. "I can't take this." Holt smiled faintly. "You already did. Consider it a beginning, not an end." For the first time, Naomi noticed the emblem stitched into his vest. Not just the Hells Angels insignia, but a smaller patch beneath it, Lily's legacy. "What is that?" she asked softly. Holt's expression shifted, something painful flickered behind his eyes. "My daughter's name," he said. "She died because I couldn't afford what she needed. I swore no one would go through that again if I could help it. You reminded me that promise still matters." Naomi's throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Holt said gently. "Just live better. Feed your kid. Help the next one who knocks." Behind him, the bikers began unloading the boxes, setting up tables, passing out bags of groceries and blankets. The smell of roasted coffee drifted from a portable kettle someone had brought. Within minutes, the street transformed from panic to something like celebration. Kids gathered around the bikes wide-eyed as riders let them honk the horns. Even Mrs. Peterson, despite herself, accepted a bag of groceries after Cole politely handed her one. Naomi stood still amid it all, trying to take it in, the laughter. The rumble of engines cooling the way, sunlight bounced off chrome and filled the street with silver. Then Holt spoke again, quieter now just for her. "You didn't just save me, Naomi. You saved something I thought was dead, the part of me that believed people could still be good without wanting something back." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You don't even know me." He smiled faintly. "I don't need to." Upstairs, Leah had come to the window, waving shyly. Holt glanced up, lifted a hand in greeting. The little girl's smile lit up the whole block. "Take care of her," he said. "I will," Naomi whispered. Holt nodded, stepped back toward his bike and motioned to his crew. One by one, the riders mounted, engines rumbling to life again. Not menacing this time, but strong, unified, proud. As they rolled down the street, Neighbors lined the sidewalks, phones out, some clapping, some wiping tears. Naomi stood barefoot on the pavement, still holding the envelope, the roar of 100 engines fading into the morning Sunday. Mrs. Peterson came up beside her, eyes soft for the first time. "I guess I was wrong," she said quietly. Naomi smiled. "Maybe we both were." The wind carried the last echo of Harley engines down the block, blending with the laughter of children and the rustle of grocery bags. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood didn't feel divided by fear. It felt alive. The roar of engines had faded, but the echo of that morning still lingered in the air like the memory of a storm. Hours after the bikers left, the street looked nothing like it had before. Tables stood where fear once lived, covered with boxes of food, warm clothes and toys. Kids laughed as they carried grocery bags bigger than their arms. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years stood side by side, helping each other unload what the bikers had left behind. Naomi Carter stood in the middle of it all, still barefoot, still holding the envelope. The white paper felt heavier than it should have. The check inside, $25,000, was enough to pay off her debts, fix the car she hadn't driven in months, maybe even start fresh somewhere new. But she hadn't decided if she could touch it. Mrs. Peterson approached slowly, her usual tight-lipped scowl replaced by something softer. "They said the food's for everyone," she muttered, eyes downcast. "I thought maybe that was just talk." Naomi smiled faintly. "Looks real to me." The older woman hesitated, then added quietly, "I was wrong about you, Naomi. I'm sorry." Naomi looked up surprised. "You don't owe me that. I judged you," Mrs. Peterson said. "Judged them too. I guess I forgot what gratitude looks like." Naomi nodded, her throat tight. "We all forget sometimes." At the far end of the street, a familiar sound broke through the hum of voices, the steady growl of a single motorcycle. Naomi turned. Holt was back, cane in hand, helmet hooked on his forearm. Beside him walked Cole, carrying a thick folder. Neighbors stepped aside as they approached. Holt stopped a few feet from Naomi and smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd leave without saying goodbye, did you?" Naomi let out a shaky laugh. "I wasn't sure what to think." Holt gestured to Cole, who opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers clipped together. "This," Holt said, "is a job offer. Full-time. With my organization." Naomi blinked. "A job, community outreach coordinator for Lily's legacy," he said. "You've already proven you can lead by example. I figure we could use someone who still believes in people." Naomi stared at the papers, speechless. I don't even know what to say." Cole handed her the folder gently. "You'll be working with food drives, medical aid, emergency response, real community work, the kind that matters." Naomi looked between them, overwhelmed. "Why me?" Holt's expression softened. "Because you didn't see a biker, you saw a man who needed help. That's the kind of sight the world's short on." He nodded toward the street where children played with new toys under the afternoon. "Sunday. You started something here, Naomi. All I did was follow your lead." She felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm not a leader." "Funny," Holt said, smiling. "That's exactly what a real one says." Naomi flipped through the pages. There was a salary printed there, more money than she'd ever seen on paper, and a benefits package that made her hands shake. She could breathe again. Leah could breathe again. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "It's too much." Holt shook his head. "You spent your last $8 on a dying stranger. That's not something you can repay with a thank you. This isn't charity, Naomi. It's partnership." Behind them, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors, kids, even Mrs. Peterson, watching, listening. For once their faces weren't guarded. They were curious, hopeful. Naomi swallowed the lump in her throat. "If I take this job, what do I do first?" Holt smiled. "Simple. You help someone else the way you helped me." Naomi exhaled a laugh that turned into a sob. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," Holt said, "but it's worth it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small keyring. "One more thing." He handed her the keys. Naomi frowned. "What's this, your car?" "Fixed up, gassed up, waiting around the corner." Naomi shook her head in disbelief. "I don't," why Holt shrugged. "Because you're going to need it to get to work." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Mrs. Peterson chuckled softly. Naomi looked down at the keys, her reflection catching on the chrome. "I don't know how to thank you." Holt leaned on his cane. "You already did." For a long moment they stood there in silence, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the scent of warm asphalt. Naomi realized the fear that had filled the air earlier was gone. In its place was something entirely different: gratitude, connection, maybe even pride. Cole glanced at Holt, who nodded toward the open boxes. "Keep what you need. The rest share it. That's how this works." Naomi wiped at her cheeks, smiling through tears. "I will." Leah came running down the steps, barefoot, hair flying. "Mommy, Mommy, look!" She pointed toward the side of the street, where one of the bikers was kneeling, helping another child climb onto his Harley. "He said I could sit on it," Holt grinned. "Go ahead, kiddo. Just don't start a gang yet." The laughter that followed rolled through the crowd like a ripple of sunlight. Even Naomi laughed the sound light and unguarded for the first time in months. Cole reached out, shaking Naomi's hand. "You've got our number. Don't be a stranger." As they turned to leave, Holt paused beside her one last time. "Naomi," he said quietly, "you gave me a reason to believe again. Don't let anyone take that from you." She nodded. "I won't." When the engine started again, the sound wasn't menacing. It was music, steady, powerful, alive. The bikes rolled down the street, two by two, sunlight catching their chrome until they looked almost angelic. As the last one disappeared around the corner, Naomi looked down at the papers in her hand, the keys glinting between her fingers, the check folded in her pocket. For the first time, the future didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like something she could build. Around her, the neighbors lingered, smiling, talking, helping each other carry boxes inside. The fear that had divided them was gone, replaced by the sound of children laughing and the scent of hope carried on warm air. Naomi turned to Mrs. Peterson, who was cradling a bag of flour in her arms. "You think this'll last?" The older woman smiled dryly. "If you've got anything to do with it, honey, I think it will." Naomi laughed softly, looked up at the sky, and whispered to herself, "Kindness rides farther than we think." She didn't know yet that by the end of the week, news of that morning would travel far beyond their little street, or that what started with $8 crumpled and a bottle of aspirin would become the first spark in something much bigger. But as she turned toward her daughter, her car, her new beginning, she finally understood what Holt meant when he said, "This isn't charity, it's partnership." It wasn't about being rescued. It was about being seen, and that Naomi thought was the real gift. A week later, Naomi Carter stood outside a converted brick warehouse on the edge of town. Above the entrance hung a new sign painted in gold and white: Lily's Legacy Community Center. The name still didn't feel real. The first time she'd seen it, her throat had tightened. A name born from someone else's loss now became the start of her own renewal. Inside, the smell of fresh paint still mingled with sawdust. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned food, blankets, and first aid kits. A line of folding tables stood beneath a banner that read, "Take what you need, give what you can." It was simple, it was human. Naomi ran her hand over the smooth tabletop, smiling faintly. "This used to be a storage garage," she said. Cole, standing beside her in his vest and work boots, chuckled. "Yeah." Holt figured it was time the space started storing hope instead. She turned toward him. "And he's really okay with me running this." "He's not just okay with it," Cole said. "He said you're the reason it exists. You were the proof of concept." Naomi laughed softly. "Proof of concept sounds like something out of a science lab." Cole grinned. Maybe. Or maybe kindness is just the one thing people forgot to test properly. By noon, the doors opened to the public. The first families trickled in, tired mothers, with children, old men leaning on canes, teenagers carrying plastic bags. Naomi welcomed each one with a smile, helping them fill boxes with groceries and hygiene kits. For every thank you she received, she offered one back. Outside, the distant sound of engines rumbled again, but this time it wasn't fear that gripped the street. A dozen bikers rolled up and parked near the entrance, their vests patched with Lily's legacy beneath the old Hells Angels insignia. Children ran to the curb, eyes wide. "They're back!" someone shouted. Naomi stepped out just as Holt dismounted his bike. He was moving better now, cane tapping in rhythm with his stride. When he reached her, he smiled faintly. "Told you we'd be partners." Naomi shook her head in disbelief. "You really meant it." "Always do," he said. "We're not the kind of people who make promises lightly." She gestured to the building behind her. "It's working." People came. "They're not scared anymore." Holt's eyes softened. "They're not scared because you gave them something stronger than fear: ownership. You didn't wait for a miracle, Naomi. You built one." She looked back at the line forming by the door. "I just wanted to make things a little easier for them." "That's exactly where it starts," Holt said. "A little easier, a little kinder, then the world remembers how to breathe again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small patch with the crown and wings emblem. "For you," he said. Naomi frowned. "I don't ride," Holt chuckled. "You don't have to. It's not a biker patch. It's a promise that this brotherhood stands behind you, always." She took it, the fabric rough against her fingers, and smiled. "I'll keep it safe." "Don't," Holt said. "Put it where people can see it." That afternoon, the building buzzed with energy. Bikers unloaded boxes, repaired shelves, and served food while Naomi managed the flow. Cole helped a group of teenagers set up a small reading area in the corner. Grace, her old co-worker, arrived after work, apron still on, to volunteer. Even Mrs. Peterson showed up with a tray of cookies, muttering something about needing to make sure they're doing it right. By sunset, the line outside had dwindled, but laughter still filled the space. Children chased each other between tables, their footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. Naomi watched from the doorway, the warm orange light painting the room gold. Holt joined her again, leaning on his cane. "You know what this reminds me of?" he asked. "What?" "The day after a storm," he said. "When everything's quiet, but you can still feel that something's been washed clean." Naomi nodded, eyes glistening. "I used to think people like me didn't get second chances. Turns out I was wrong." "You earned it," Holt said simply. "And the best part, you're not the only one." She turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the street. The neighbors were still out talking, smiling, sharing bags of food. Two boys helped one of the bikers push a heavy crate inside. Across the road, Mrs. Peterson handed a loaf of bread to a man she'd once refused to speak to. "Look at them," Holt said. "That's what you started. The rebuild isn't the building, Naomi. It's this people remembering they belong to each other." Naomi felt her throat tighten again, but she smiled. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," Holt said, "but it's worth riding for." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the pavement. Naomi looked around at the families, the bikers, the neighbors who'd stopped being strangers, and for the first time, the street didn't feel broken. It felt alive. As the last family left and the doors closed for the night, Naomi turned off the lights. In the dark, the gold letters on the sign outside still caught the glow from the street lamps. "Lily's legacy." She whispered softly, "Kindness rides farther than we think." Behind her, the low rumble of a few departing motorcycles rolled down the block, steady and calm, not the sound of chaos, but of purpose. The rebuild had begun, and this time it was built to last. By the following week, Naomi Carter's quiet street was no longer quiet. What had started as whispers between neighbors had turned into headlines. A teenager from the block had filmed the moment the bikers filled the street, the roar of engines, the boxes of food, Holt's voice carrying through the air, and uploaded it to social media. Within 24 hours, the clip had hit 1 million views. The caption read, "Single mom spends her last $8 to save a biker. Next day, 100 of them show up to repay her kindness." At first, the internet didn't believe it. The comment sections filled with skepticism. Staged. Fake charity stunt. PR move from a biker gang trying to look good. Naomi saw the noise online and closed her laptop. She didn't know how to respond to strangers arguing about her life. She went back to work at Lily's Legacy, helping stock shelves and welcome families who came through the door. She told herself it didn't matter whether the world believed it. The people here did. But then something strange happened. One by one, other stories started surfacing. People from across the country commented on the post. "They helped my brother after his house burned down. They fixed my mom's wheelchair for free. They brought toys to our shelter last Christmas." The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a stunt. It was a movement, one that had been happening quietly for years. Naomi's story had simply pulled the curtain back. 2 days later, the local news van pulled up outside Lily's Legacy. Naomi froze at the sight of the cameras. Grace whispered, "You better put on some lipstick, honey, you're about to be famous." The reporter, a young man in a navy suit, introduced himself. "Miss Carter, we've been covering what everyone's calling the $8 miracle. Could we talk about what happened?" Naomi hesitated, but Holt, who'd just arrived with coal, gave her a nod. "Tell them the truth," he said quietly. "That's all you've got to do." The cameras rolled. Naomi stood by the front door of the community center, the gold sign glinting above her head. She spoke slowly, honestly about the accident, the decision to spend her last money the way Holt and his crew had shown up the next day. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just saw someone who needed help. I think the world's forgotten how simple that is." The reporter asked, "And what happened afterward?" Naomi smiled faintly. "He reminded me that kindness doesn't end with one act. It spreads, if you let it." That night, the segment aired on the evening news. The next morning, national outlets picked it up. Naomi woke to hundreds of messages, people donating, volunteering, asking how to help. The hashtag number Lily's Legacy began trending across the country. In towns miles away, bikers organized food drives under the same emblem, the crown with wings. In cities, local chapters started their own community centers. What had begun as a single street's redemption was becoming a network of compassion. One message came from a nurse in Kansas City. "I saw the story. We've started our own outreach. You inspired us." Another from a teacher in Portland. "My students are collecting $8 donations. We call it Naomi's Fund." Naomi read each one, overwhelmed. She didn't know what to do with the attention, so she did what she'd always done. She worked. Lily's Legacy grew faster than anyone expected. Volunteers flooded in. The once empty shelves stayed stocked. Holt spent more time at the center than on the road. When a journalist asked him why, he answered simply, "Because hope has better mileage than hate." Cole laughed when he heard it later. "You should put that on a shirt." By the end of the month, the mayor's office held a small ceremony honoring the center's impact. Naomi stood on stage beside Holt, blinking under the bright lights. When it was her turn to speak, she looked out at the audience, neighbors, bikers, families she'd helped, and said, "A few weeks ago, I had nothing but $8 and a choice. I chose compassion. Today, I see what that choice became. It isn't mine anymore, it's ours." The applause was quiet at first, then grew until the whole room was on its feet. Afterward, as they stood outside under the soft glow of streetlights, Holt rested a hand on Naomi's shoulder. You realize what you've done, right? Naomi smiled. I just did what anyone would have done. He shook his head. No. You did what everyone could have done, but didn't. That's the difference. From somewhere down the block, the low rumble of bikes echoed faintly, riders arriving for the night shift at the center, carrying boxes ready to work. The sound no longer frightened anyone. It was part of the rhythm now, steady, familiar, like a heartbeat the town had finally remembered. Naomi looked up at the sky where the clouds glowed orange under the city lights. Do you think it'll last? Holt smiled. Kindness doesn't fade, Naomi. It rides. And as the engines grew louder, blending with laughter from the open doors of Lily's legacy, Naomi knew he was right. It had started with 8 crumpled dollars and one impossible decision. Now it was echoing across a nation. 1 year later, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Lily's legacy, illuminating a crowd that filled the old warehouse from wall to wall. What had once been a dusty garage was now alive with color and sound, tables of food, rows of volunteers, children laughing as they decorated cardboard wings with gold paint. A banner stretched across the ceiling, 1 year of Lily's legacy where kindness rides on. Naomi Carter stood by the entrance, her name stitched on a volunteer vest. She barely recognized the place or herself. A year ago, she'd stood on a cracked sidewalk holding her last $8, praying for a miracle. Now she was the one organizing them. Holt arrived late as always. The crowd cheered when he walked in, cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. His once grey face looked stronger, more alive. Cole followed him, carrying a box filled with framed photographs, portraits of the volunteers, the families they'd helped, the small moments that had built a movement. Naomi met him halfway, smiling. You're still bad at being on time. Holt chuckled. I told you we bikers don't rush miracles. He looked around, taking in the packed hall. You did good, Naomi. Better than good. No, she said softly. We did good. The ceremony began with laughter and stories. Grace spoke about quitting her job to volunteer full-time. Mrs. Peterson, now known affectionately as Grandma P, told everyone how she'd gone from calling the police to baking cookies for the riders every Thursday. Even Leah got up to read a short poem about heroes with motorcycles and hearts made of light. When Holt stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent. He looked out over the sea of faces, his voice steady but filled with gravel. Last year, I almost died on the side of a road. Would have been a fine ending for the man I used to be, angry, lost, too proud to ask for help. He paused, his gaze finding Naomi in the front row. But a woman with nothing gave me everything that mattered. And because of her, I'm still here. Because of her, we are all here. Applause thundered through the room. Naomi felt her eyes sting. Holt raised his hand. This place isn't about charity. It's about dignity. It's proof that kindness can outrun any lie the world tells about who deserves help and who doesn't. So today we celebrate that truth, and the woman who reminded us how simple it is to care. He gestured toward Naomi. The crowd turned, clapping, cheering. Leah ran up and hugged her leg. Naomi took a slow breath, stepped up to the microphone. Thank you, she said, voice trembling. I don't know if I'll ever get used to people clapping for me. But the truth is, I didn't save anyone. I just acted. I did what I hoped someone would do for my daughter if I wasn't there. She glanced toward Holt, smiling through tears. You told me once that kindness rides farther than we think. I guess you were right. More applause. Cameras flashed. Outside, a line of motorcycles gleamed in the sunlight, each bearing the gold crown and wings emblem. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled into the parking lot for the community cookout. The smell of grilled food and motor oil filled the air. Laughter rolled across the lot like music. Holt leaned against his bike, watching Naomi move between the tables, hugging volunteers, handing out plates, laughing with the kids. Cole nudged him. She's good at this. Holt smiled. She was born for it. She just needed someone to remind her. Later that afternoon, when the event wound down, Naomi stepped out for some air. The sun was dipping low, washing the sky in soft amber. She wandered toward the edge of the street, where it all began, the same cracked sidewalk, the same stretch of road where she'd once spent her last $8. There, by coincidence or something greater, a car sat parked with its hood up. A young man stood beside it, frustration on his face. He wore a mechanic's uniform stained with grease. "Hey," Naomi called, walking closer. "Need help?" he sighed. "Yeah. I ran out of gas a mile from the shop and my phone's dead. Can't even call my boss." Naomi smiled. "Hang on." She reached into her bag, pulled out her wallet and counted out a $50 bill. "Here. It's not much, but it'll get you moving again." He shook his head, startled. "I can't take that." "Sure you can," she said, pressing it into his hand. "When you're ready, pass it on." The man blinked, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, ma'am." Naomi watched as he started his car and drove off, the sunlight catching his rearview mirror until it vanished over the hill. For a moment the world was still the same quiet street, the same hum of distant engines. But this time she wasn't standing there wishing for a miracle. She was one. Back inside, Holt found her gazing out the door. "Everything okay?" Naomi smiled softly. "Perfect. Just finishing what I started." He nodded, following her gaze down the street. "It never really ends, does it?" "No," she said. "That's the best part." They stood together, watching as the last light of day bled across the horizon. A few of the bikers revved their engines, the deep, steady rumble filling the evening air. Holt looked at Naomi. "You hear that?" She smiled. "Sounds like hope to me." The bikes rolled out one by one, headlights glowing like a river of fire under the setting. Sunday Leah waved from the doorway, shouting goodbye as Naomi lifted her into her arms. The story that had started with $8 and a bottle of aspirin had become something much bigger, a chain of kindness that showed no signs of stopping. Naomi turned to the camera crew filming the anniversary event, her voice clear, strong, and full of conviction. If this story reminded you that compassion still rides among us, don't just watch, act. Be the reason someone believes again. And if you want to keep seeing stories like this, subscribe to Heart Tales, because somewhere out there, another act of kindness is already on the road. The engines thundered in the distance as the screen faded to black. And in the quiet that followed, one truth remained. It only took $8 to change everything.